It's now recording.
Amazing.
Oh man, it's 3 minutes past 2. We've all just come from a JKR brief. JKR have just sent us a beautiful 1 week live brief. There might be a couple of people that felt the need to have a wee before enjoying a Tom masterclass. Oh, we're up to 28. What was that, Jay? It wasn't. I reckon we get started, and I'm recording this, and people can drop in. But you are, I think, just one of the most chilled, relaxed, easygoing, welcoming, loving, all kind of people. If people want to join in halfway through, I know you'll be okay with them coming back to the start in a video, because there is no beginning, middle, and end. It's fluid, right? It's like whatever, however. And in a way, that's a good way to introduce you, because you weren't a member of a normal intake. You joined a really strange intake at a really strange time in SCA's journey. You were what we called a love child student. And the love child intake, they were my second intake. The Busk were my first. Christ knows why they joined a school, because we had no reputation, we weren't trading, we didn't even have a space. And so that Busk intake, I mean, God knows why they did. You at least, you came to a space to interview, and I will always remember your interview bringing that that Princess Diana, Lady Diana in a suitcase was just beautiful. It was just beautiful. It was beautiful as you are beautiful, Tom. But what I think unifies your intake and the Busk intake is how much of a risk-taking intake you were. We had no reputation. Really, the first intake to cement our reputation would follow you, the Spank intake, when we won our first Black Pencil. So I've always seen you as similar to I see Busk, one of those risk takers, adventurers, always wanting to try new things. And I think that's a lot about you. Before you came to SCA, you were definitely very experimental, joining SCA experimental. Where you chose to go to on placement, experimental. But you've ended up in an agency which is, yeah, I mean, it's experimental, but it's a safe bet, because everybody knows that Uncommon is going to be like the Saatchis of the 70s, that Niels Leonard is the Charles and Maurice Saatchi and Tim Bell of 2020. Well, and Natalie, obviously, in the team. That it is the most exciting place to work right now. And you are the most exciting team at that agency right now. You know, you arrived there and you made that ITV Trevor McDonald, which is still on TV now and still gives me goosebumps as I watch it. And you're still making stuff that makes me go, I fucking love this boy. I fucking love you, Tom. I'm going to turn off my screen now and I'm going to sit back and I'm going to bask in the genius that is Tom Alsap. Hey!
Oh my God, what a bloody intro. That was amazing. Thank you so much. That's really kind. And thank you all for tuning in. This is super, super strange, but I really appreciate it. And I know that your time is precious. So hopefully we'll be as useful as I can. Mark just did an amazing intro, the like of which I've never had in my life. But yeah, I'm I guess one of the oldest alumni that you can get at SCA. I'm close to becoming completely irrelevant. And I studied in 2011 and it was amazing and it was a roller coaster and it was terrifying and I kind of cried quite a lot in cupboards and round corners and I had a really good time. And then like Mark says, I've had a slightly strange journey after that. So when we were still at school, my partner and I at the time, Laura, took a job at MySpace before we left to work there. And there wasn't much of MySpace then, and there certainly isn't much now. It's all kind of just crumbled into nothing. So I did that for 6 months, and then I got offered a job at the same time when we left SCA in Chicago. We met this woman by complete chance. There were only 6 or 8 of us, I think, in the Love Child intake, and we left school at Christmas time because that's the way it worked. It was like a 1.5 year. So there was nobody around, nobody wanted to offer jobs. And this woman walked in and just said, oh, you know, have you ever thought about working in Chicago? And I thought, no, don't know anything about Chicago. I know about Deep Pan Pizza and Al Capone, I think. But 6 months later, I found myself moving to America without a partner to take up this job. And for the next 2.5 years, I worked at Havas, and I shot ads in LA, and I put up with the Chicago winter, which was savage, minus 30 degrees in the winter and plus up to 40 in the summer. So it was a savage place to work, but it was amazing. And that's where I was a junior creative, and that's where I sort of learned my craft a little bit. After 2.5 years, I missed everything back here. I missed advertising in the UK because it's phenomenal. So I got in touch with an old friend, Christopher, who I'd known for a couple of years, who was at BNB. While he was at BNB, his first ever TV ad was something called The Ogre for Thomson Holidays, which won him a Lion, his first ever TV thing, which is a testament to how brilliant a writer he is. And he'd done a bit of time there, and I came back for a week and we decided to interview together. No shared work, just a kind of combined book that we'd smooshed. So we went around various different agencies. We went to Mother and we went to VCCP, and VCCP offered us very kindly a job, our first job together, based on our chemistry. And by the time I flew back to America after a week in the UK, I had a job to move back to. So quit, packed everything up, flew back over, and we did 2 and a bit years at VCCP, who were very good to us. We worked on a lot of O2 stuff. We made an animation for the Rugby World Cup, which is called Make Them Giants. And we got to use all these Disney animators, and we recorded a score at Abbey Road, and it was quite a trip. But after a while at VCCP, we became the kind of kooky team. And VCCP is a wonderful place, but it's not enormously kooky. So we decided to kind of see where we should go next. And we talked to a few different people and ended up going to Grey to go and work with Vicky Maguire, because we liked her a lot. We met her and we liked her. And there we spent about 1.5 years, it felt like, working on M&S Christmas, very unsuccessfully. And completely candidly, it was completely the wrong fit. It was good for us to move, but it never felt like home. And Grey is an agency that has gone through a massive shift. My bosses now used to run it, Natalie, Nils and Lucy, and Grey was phenomenal. But it's kind of one of those agencies that goes up and down, and right now it's quite down. So we were there for a while, and down the road, this agency had opened Uncommon, started by Nils, Natalie and Lucy, who used to head up Grey. And a friend of mine, Jen, who I'd worked with at VCCP as a producer, said, "Oh, come and meet Nils. He'll either really like you or he just won't get you at all and he won't like you." So we went in, and Nils is quite an amazing creature. I think you guys have met him, I'm not sure. I think he came in and did a masterclass, but we'd never met him before. We'd only heard about him, and he's one of those people who is a bit of a legend in his own lifetime. And I kind of, my bullshit detector is pretty sensitive, so I kind of thought he might just be hot air. I think a lot of people think that about him. But we kind of thought, you know what, we're not very happy where we are. Let's give it a go. So we went freelance and we went to Uncommon. We were very lucky that we had a slightly unusual offering to take to Nils. Obviously us, our young nubile bodies, but also a client that we'd pitched at VCCP, Ecover, had come to us as we were thinking about leaving Grey and said, "We love you guys. We want to work with you. We loved you in the pitch at VCCP, but we never got to work with you because you left." And so we went to Nils and said, "Look, we'd love to come and work for you, but we'd like to come and bring this client as well," which is slightly an unusual thing for a creative team to do. And it was all very experimental and a bit up in the air, but we thought, oh, fuck it. And Nils is the kind of person who went, "Yeah, okay, let's give it a go. You come in, bring them in, see how it goes. Could be a car crash. When can you start?" So in we went to Uncommon, who at the time were about 15, 20 people, sharing an office that they were kind of rapidly outgrowing in Farringdon. And we've now been there for about 1.5 years, I think. And for the first time in my career, and I've been doing this, I left FCA in 2012, I've been doing this for 8 years now. I have genuinely feel like I have found somewhere that I can call home. And Christopher feels the same way. Uncommon, Mark's right, like I didn't have a normal route into advertising. I'm 33 now, so I went to SCA when I was about 25, 26, I'd already done a few different things. I'd been to art school. I'd worked in logistics. I'd worked in production. I'd done all these different, like, just tried to figure it out. I worked in the Apple store. And by the time I got to Uncommon, it just became like massively apparent to me that this was the kind of place that felt a bit like art school. It felt a bit like SCA. It felt a bit kind of like there wasn't anybody up top kind of keeping an eye on the money. There is, but it felt like you could just play. And since we've been at Uncommon, we have been so prolific. We've made more work than we've made in our entire career. And actually, you meet a lot of older creatives who bang on about how the 90s were the kind of golden age of advertising, or the 80s were the golden age of advertising, or the 70s were the golden age of advertising, if you go way back, because there was so much work around and there was so much to do. And as a creative team, you constantly were being challenged and constantly had 4 things on the go, and you were making 15 ads a year. And I think it felt like during our time at VCCP in Grey, those days had gone, and we would get given amazing opportunities. We would get given the M&S Christmas advert, but you'd work on that for 6 months. And when that's it, it can be very hard to kind of keep your momentum up. But Uncommon is very different. We have our clients that we've worked on anyway. We have ITV, we have The Guardian, we have Ecover and Method, we have Dreams, we have B&Q. We have a really great list of clients in the first place, but we also have some kind of unexpected people in there. Dreams and ITV are not the world's sexiest clients on paper. You know, when you think about which television network you want to work for, you want to work for Channel 4, you want to work for the BBC, you know. So ITV feels like a kind of different proposition, and it feels like kind of Love Island, and it feels like all sorts of kind of different things that maybe people are a bit more judgy about. And I think they have actually been probably the best clients we've ever worked for. They're really quite amazing. They take a lot of risks. They let us do stuff that really pushes it, and they let us take their channel and kind of show it to them anew. So we made, as Mark mentioned, the television film with Trevor McDonald. We're making a lot of mental health work at the moment for Mental Health Awareness Week. We have gone into overdrive as an agency, and I think we've made something like 300 films for them in lockdown, on different themes and touching on different things and the different celebrities. The whole Britain Get Talking campaign, which we started earlier in the year, Josh Tenser did with Gem, who was another alumni. They kind of rebooted once lockdown started, and we have all of this kind of amazing UGC that we really got in on early and felt like we did something kind of fresh with. So we're currently working on what happens in Mental Health Awareness Week, which is all kind of animated and quite interesting. We've got some great print away. And also we've just, last week, as well as all of this stuff, we've just done a thing called Sense of Normality. I don't know if you guys will have seen it.
Yeah.
I can show you. Have you sent it around, or?
I've been seeing it all over Twitter. I'd love to see more, but wow.
It's the best thing ever. I absolutely love it.
So that was an idea for Method, one of our clients. And about 3 weeks ago, we took it to Method, and they were like, it's not quite right for us, but we really liked it. And it's actually our placement team, Tia and Cecilia, who are from Denmark, came up with the idea of making Method products that smelt like the places that you missed. And we just loved that. So we kind of said, oh, look, why don't we do something else with it? Why don't we turn it into a candle brand? We found a partner in Earl of East. And in 2 weeks, we turned it around. We got 3 illustrators from all over the world, to do the different scents. And we scamped it, and we figured out production, and we figured out logistics, and they've gone live. And it went out and it had a really nice reception, which was lovely. But the most amazing thing, which we found out today, is over the weekend, they've sold 450 candles. And each of those are 45 quid. So at the rate that we're going, we've probably raised over £12,000 for
That's incredible. Well done. That's amazing.
So
I don't want to belittle that, Tom, but you said 400 candles. Would you just mind saying 4 candles, just for the record?
4 candles. And that's not being braggy, that's just exciting, because my boyfriend works in hospitality. So we picked Hospitality Action as a charity. They are trying to look after all of the chefs and the waiters and the people who work behind bars who haven't got jobs right now, by giving them grants. So again, like Mark said, Uncommon is the kind of agency where we can go, we want to make a candle brand, and our bosses will go, fuck yeah, let's try and make a candle brand. Like, how do we do this? We haven't got any money, we haven't got any time, but let's just make it happen. So we've really found somewhere that we can call home in Uncommon. And I think I'm really
Can I
very
just
proud
say,
of
sorry,
that.
Tom, this is not the first time you've done that or that sort of thing.
No.
By any stretch. And some of the stuff you've done, I mean, I'm thinking about some of the music you've made, for example. And, you know, it's one of the reasons I think why, you know, we're hearing you talk and why you're at Uncommon now. I truly believe, and it's the same when I talk to my contemporaries. You know, my classmate when I was at school was Dave Bell, who's now running Kessel Kramer. It's those real sort of oddballs who also like to make things, I think, that end up getting to the top of this game, you know. So tell us about the music you made, because that was also just genius.
So the music we made, we did an album called Hers, and basically it was for what was it for? It's a Refuge, the women's charity, and we were at Grey and we were very bored, and we, again, it's another pun. But we kind of I made a flippant joke about how, you know, enough hymns, we need some Hers. You know, at the time it was very much in the middle of the Me Too movement and all that kind of thing, and so we thought that was quite funny. And we had a friend at the time who worked in music called Jonathan Goldstein, and he wanted to come up with a way of promoting his music company at Christmas. So we took this idea to him and we said, imagine if we get an actual choir and a real session in a real studio, we rewrite classic hymns and turn them into Hers. So we actually did a few ourselves, and then we also did some with Lauren and Augustine, other alumni who we're very fond of. And we rewrote them, and they are available on Spotify. It's HYRRS. And we put it out there and we PR'd it, and our boss Vicky went on the radio and talked about it. And it's actually one of the reasons that Nils hired us, because he's not a traditional advertising person, and a lot of the other stuff in our book that we made for O2 is very impressive. It's big films and stuff, but he loved Hers. He thought that was brilliant. He thought it was really bonkers, and we just did that ourselves because I think at the time Grey was very busy trying to get new accounts, and it wasn't really very focused on being proactive. So we just thought, oh fuck it, you know, how do we make this happen ourselves? We don't need to have any seed money. We don't need to have any input. We can just make the artwork, use our connections that we've made with people like Jonathan, and just make it happen.
Love that. Yeah. I've thrown your speech all over the place, Tom, haven't I?
No, it's not. I mean, it's not really a speech. I wanted to come in because I normally come in and I have a kind of whole skit rehearsed and I have a whole deck, and I know this isn't really a usual time. So I really wanted to come and say hi. And I wanted to just give you a little potted history of who we are. We're not, like Mark said, we're not really a traditional team. We're not really a digital team. We're kind of a strange little couple of mates that hang around together, and quite a lot of the time are quite silly. And I think we haven't just left SCA and had this incredible career from the outset. We haven't gone to the coolest agency at the beginning. We've noodled around and we've taken a different path. And I think I was thinking about what to chat to you guys about, and it's that really. I think I'm now 8 years in and I've had an amazing career, but I haven't immediately wanted to go to a Droga or been able to go to a Droga or a Wydens or one of the big starry ones, and I've ended up accidentally at this very cool place, which is really very satisfying. But what I wanted to say to you guys, if you're interested, is like I said in the description of this talk, like I'd love to know how you guys are getting on and how you're feeling about the situation you're in, and if there's anything you'd like to ask me about how I got where I am or what I'm up to right now or anything that you think would be useful, then holla. If that's all right with you, Mark.
Yeah, of course. DJ.
That's the end of my spiel. Sorry.
Is that the end of your spiel? I'll ask you some more questions to bring some spiel back in a bit, because I've been stalking you for 8 years. But meanwhile, DJ.
Hey, you said that you left school as a single, right?
Yes.
So I had 2 questions. How did you find the process of leaving school and working as a single? And did you want a partner at the time? And the other part of that is, how did you manage that process of going from a place that wasn't quite where you wanted to be to get into slightly better places each time and arriving up Uncommon?
So me leaving school as a single is a complicated answer to the question. So I started SCA with a girl called Laura Warpole, and she was my partner, and then she had to leave the school, so then I was on my own, and then I bounced around. I was a bit slutty, and I actually ended up leaving with Laura because she came back in and did the last section with me, and we went to MySpace together. But when I came to go to America, because of various different things in Laura's life, she couldn't come with me. So then I ended up being single. So I ended up going to America as a single, which is super weird and a bit uncomfortable because I was only 6 months out of school. But actually in the States, that's how they work. It's far more common to be a single creative than it is to be in a team, certainly in Chicago where I was. So I had to suddenly learn to be on my own, but also they would just pair you up with different people for different projects. So I'd work with a creative director, or I'd work with a senior, or I'd work with a junior, or I'd work with someone on my level, and some for different projects. So that was an amazing period to learn in, because actually I think what was great about Chicago was I was completely on my own. I didn't know anybody in Chicago. Why would you? And I just had to fend for myself. And actually what it did was it made me very confident in my own abilities, because I think it's very, very easy with a partner to forget what it is that makes you you and what makes them them, and to separate those things. So every single year that we talk to SCA, and it's been a few years now, people always ask like, oh, I'm thinking, you know, could I be a single? Would it work as a single? And I would say, I'm always very honest. A lot of agencies won't consider you as a single because they don't really know what to do with you. But and there's always outliers. Uncommon is an interesting example. We have Jem Baumeister, who I'm sure you've all met, and she's a good friend of the school. She is a single, and she came into SCA, into Uncommon with her partner, I think, from SCA at the time, and they ended up breaking up. And Nils, she just stayed on. So she's, you know, she plugging away, being her own special thing, and makes it work. So I think it depends where you want to go in terms of being single. I always encourage people to think about going to the States. At the moment, that doesn't seem very realistic, but once everything has calmed down a little bit, I know that Robin Frost, who's another alumni, ended up going to Chicago, and I talked to her a little bit about that when she did that, and she's had an amazing time. So if you really want to be a single, then there are other ways than just trying to hammer on that door with all the other pairs. There is hope, but you just have to think a bit outside the box.
So I guess I have two kind of follow-up questions. Would you recommend going to the States? Because I quite like the States, so I would really like to live there for a bit, so I wouldn't mind. And do you find that process, you said that that's how they work there, they pair you with different people, so do you find that like working with lots of different people helped you to grow faster when you left to school?
Yeah, definitely. I'm a very independent person. I'm very bossy. I can be very judgy. These aren't necessarily my best qualities, but they also kind of help with my job sometimes. I have had loads of creative partners, and I've spent periods with people. So in the States, I ended up kind of settling with a guy called Zach, who was a really talented young writer. It's a bit like dating, I think. You know, you meet some people, and sometimes there's this like, it's just awful, but it's kind of great. And sometimes it's just shit. And sometimes it's just for now, and it kind of comes and goes. And sometimes it's for life. You know, I think all of the experiences are really valid. It's just important to keep perspective on it. I would definitely recommend going to the States, though. It is a very different advertising world. You won't make the same kind of work that you want to make here. If you want to make John Lewis adverts, don't go to the States. But in terms of how they feel about British talent and about having new people, they were always enormously welcoming and enormously interested in what I could bring. And I think a lot of people are put off by the idea of going to the States because they think it's going to be really complicated. But actually, as a recent graduate or a student, you can actually it's quite easily get a visa for 18 months, go over there, and agencies will move you, they will help you, they will support you. So I'd recommend it. It's tough, but it's really good fun.
Good shout.
Awesome, thank you. Might give it a go.
Who else got a question for Tom? When you were in Chicago, like Dave Trott talks about how he found his voice in New York when he went to ad school and art school in New York. Yeah. And you were talking about finding your voice, but more about confidence. I think you were really saying when you were just talking, Tom. Do you think you
Yeah.
found any of your advertising voice there? Because they're very selly, aren't they?
Yeah.
And sort of,
Yeah.
you know, what did you learn about advertising there, from a tone of voice or persuasion or whatever that you brought back here?
You're right, they're very selly. What I loved about Havas at the time, I worked for a guy called Jason Peterson, who is a bit like a kind of Chicago version of Nils Leonard. He was a New Yorker that had come into Chicago to shake things up, because Chicago can be quite sleepy. And whenever we used to do reviews, basically everybody in the creative department would stand up in front of everybody and perform their scripts, a bit like being at SCA. And they were doing accents, and they were throwing in celebrities, and they'd be like, yeah, Snoop Dogg's going to do this soap brand, and it's going to be like, you know, you have to be really, you have to like fold the message into what you're saying. And that was kind of a revelation for me, because I think all the advertising, a lot of the advertising you're exposed to here is about storytelling and about, you know, this beautiful piece of art that can kind of make a point at the end, and it doesn't need to, like John Lewis had to need to sell you the clock. You know, they just take you on a beautiful journey, and everyone loves that. Whereas in the US, that would just never happen, because they'd be like, well, how much is the clock? Like, what colors does the clock come in? So you have to find ways of wedging in the information. But then for me, my sense of humor is kind of loves the challenge of that. So I ended up writing some really bonkers work about, remember we had a satellite company called Dish, who are a bit like Sky, and we wrote this piece of work. We imagined that some Dish astronauts had gone into space and got lost, and they'd come back to Earth 60 years later, horrible, gnarled old men who'd been driven mad by the empty vacuum of space. And they'd landed to discover that some people weren't using Dish products. And all the effort that they'd gone to, all that journey they'd gone on for 60 years had been for nothing. So basically it was them running around assaulting people and just screaming at them about how they've been in space for all this time and they've done all this for nothing, and now you don't even have Dish, and how dare you? And it's that kind of humor that actually it's really informed all of my work, because I think it's good to have I think it's, to get to the end, to get to my point, I think it would be easy for me to be the kind of person that would tell stories and do stuff like the Guardian work, which is about a butterfly trying to get out of a window, which is as simple as it can get. But I like having an ability to do different tones and speak in different voices. And I think a lot of creative teams that I know are very brilliant at one thing in particular, but if they're ever asked to do something different, struggle a little bit. And I feel like my time in America gave me sort of some different ways at problems, which means that our tone can vary.
Yeah,
so
it gives you some more breadth. Yeah, get it. Hey, on Guardian, I mean, I've spoken to you about this before, so, but I'm asking because I loved your answer, and I kind of want the room to hear. The Guardian, we grew up as ad students loving John Webster's Guardian. In fact, we saw it this morning as a class. Our speaker this morning played the points of view. And then, I remember probably just as you were at SCA, BBH was doing its version of Guardian, Three Little Piggies, which was iconic in its own way. Not as iconic as Webster's, but iconic. On yours and Christopher's mind must have been the weight of that brand, not just of that brand, but the weight that brand is seen by your heroes in advertising.
Yeah,
that must have been a song playing, its tune in your ears every second of the brief.
Yeah.
How did you cope with that?
It was very, very challenging, and the interesting thing about The Guardian was they came to Uncommon because Uncommon are the agency currently with the reputation for doing something a bit different. And therefore, people come to us with a wonderful brief and they go, scare us, move us, do something. We don't know what we want. The Guardian haven't made an advert like Three Little Pigs since then, really. They've done some kind of branding work, but it was quite nice, but it was very quiet. And Nils's thing is all about making an impact and doing something that stands out. And when we got the brief, we went over and over and over, and you're right, we had those adverts playing in our ear, which is terrifying. But the reality of where we are now is very different from the reality of where BBH were. The Guardian don't want to be seen to be spending lots of money on advertising anymore because they're funded by their readers. So you can't go and make a giant, beautiful £3 million advert for them anymore because they won't do it. And we also needed to do
Where
something.
did that insight come from, Tom? You, the client, your planner, somewhere else? Can you remember?
It actually came, we were working with an amazing team called Benrick, who you probably know, Mark. They are, Benrick are really interesting and worth a Google, Benrik.
Right.
And they've been around for a long time, and they're very odd, and they actually publish their own diaries called This Diary Will Change Your Life. Different story, but very good creatives. And they came in and they had something like, hope is something else. It wasn't power. And we changed it to power, and that became something we could all rally around. We read a lot of the work of a writer called Rebecca Solnit, who's written a lot of essays for The Guardian about hope, and just had to absorb all of this information. And in the end, everyone was pushing us to write films and scripts and speeches, and the kind of thing that you would naturally think you'd want to do. But Christopher found this piece of music that's on that spot later, and we all fell in love with it, and the client fell in love with it, and The Butterfly came after that. And we only had a day to film, and we had the amazing James Marsh directing, who did The Theory of Everything, so he's a proper filmmaker. And we had 40 butterflies, and you can't train them, you can't lure them, they're only attracted to sunlight, and they get sleepy after lunchtime. And we just had to hope and pray, and that advert is stitched together out of real shots. There's only one piece of post in it, which is when the butterfly flies away from the window, turns, and then comes back again. And the turn is the only thing in there that's not practical. It was a very, very good lesson in knowing that you have this enormous weight of expectation on a brand, and having to just do what you can do and do it to the best of your abilities, and push it and push it and push it. And the print campaign that went with it took us a very long time to get to. But again, it's just radically simple, and I'm really proud of it. It's one of the few pieces of work that I've ever put out that I looked at it and went, yeah.
I would love to see the iterations that took you to that. The art direction was so fresh. You know, it was so brave. The way it was so clearly branded Guardian, but without branding. And genuinely, that's something you would want to put up on your wall. It's art. Yeah. I'm sure Guardian have been selling that as art. It's art.
They actually are selling tote bags and T-shirts if you want to buy them in their shop.
Well, right, it's art. You know, you did it's an incredible piece of work, phenomenal. But man, I'd love if you can ever do a talk about iteration and the journey to get to that.
If you want to open that Pandora's box, then you're more than welcome to. Yeah.
Oh my God, yes, that would be an absolute joy. Yes, please. I've been stealing the questions. Andy.
Hey Tom.
Hello, how are you?
All right, thanks. Yeah. Jem Baumeister will tell you that she got her placement because Nils fell in love with her tattoos, and you've obviously talked about him being more interested in hers than your work.
Yeah.
And I just wondered, what does the book or the attention-grabbing thing look like that's going to get us that placement out in Common, or is it just pure blind luck at being in the right place at the right time?
Such a good question. And you know what? Since I've started working for Nils, the number of people that have emailed me and been like, "What do I do? How do I? Can you give me his number?" I'm like, I'm not going to give you his number because you can get hold of him. He's quite an easy person to get hold of. I love working for that man. He is, you know what, actually, and I'm going to pay you a compliment now, Mr. Lewis, so brace yourself. But it isn't until I met Nils and Mr. Lewis are very similar in the fact that if you ask me that same question, but about what can I put in front of Mark Lewis that's going to really get him going, I wouldn't be able to give you a clear answer still. And it's been a long time. Nils likes the new, and he doesn't like a fad, and he likes something you can get excited about. And as just a human being on a really visceral level, I'm still trying to figure it out myself, but it's just, you know, when you have something really, really good and it's burning and you've just come up with it and you think, fuck, the Sense of Normality candle is a stupid pun. And so many people told me when I was studying, oh, puns are terrible, don't do puns, whatever. I love a pun, I am dedicated to puns. And when we came up with Sense of Normality, this idea that you would want to buy a candle that you could burn and it would take you somewhere that you wish you could be, even though that somewhere smells a bit like urinal cake and beer. That if you can wrap it up in that, whenever we get a brief from Nils, it is always about what's the headline going to be? How are people going to talk about this? How are you going to package it in the real world? That's not just blah, blah, I've done an advert for this in campaign. He's so rigorous about creating something that you can talk about and that you could sell in its own right on top of selling the product. And I think it's it's a really good lesson, because he's not interested in how cute the animal is or how cool it is that we've got a Rolling Stones song or something like that. He just doesn't give a fuck about any of that stuff. He wants something unexpected, and he wants something really jarring, and he wants something. The end of the Guardian spot, there's we go to the end frame, and at the end of that there's a tiny burst of this flock of butterflies flying through the air. And that's a Nils thing. He went, I want something at the end. I don't just want the end frame. I want it to feel like you've gone on to the next film and it's gone, and then it's just gone. And it's that kind of thing. He's always pushing us. Whenever we do a shoot, one of the things that he's taught me, which is brilliant, he wants to roll the cameras all the time. He wants the person dropping the camera. He wants the tea lady wandering around in the background farting. He wants everything so that he can have all these little nuggets of stuff and create something that wasn't the plan in the first place, because he's brilliant at just kind of rolling with the punches. And I sound like I've drunk the Kool-Aid horribly, and I apologize, but he genuinely is.
I love that passion, and it's really great. And I mean, thank you for the bit of compliment there, because he's incredible. If there's something that I think I see in him and a few other people that I admire, and that I try and learn from and copy, it's I want to buy good energy, So I'm looking for, and a lot of people talk about I have my favourites at the school, and I definitely do. I mean, 11 intakes in or whatever, I definitely do. And I know that they're always the ones with the most energy. They might not always get it right, but they're the ones that are showing me 100 things and are doing 100 things and are making 100 things. And occasionally, because they got a lot of energy, they're also going to shock me.
Yes.
And that's what I feel for Nils, and why he bought, say, Tom, or why he bought, say, Jem and Martin, or why he bought Tom and Nina, and all the other greats that I get to hang about with. They all buy great energy, and they all want to be shocked.
Yeah.
And if you can do those things, and you can do them smart, you're going to be a star. You're going to be a star.
I think you're completely right. He is exhausting. I mean, I can't keep up with him, because his genuine passion is making stuff. It's not making money. It's not beating anybody else. It's literally doing the best that he can do. And I've never really worked with anybody like that before, because there's normally other factors at play. And him having his own place, and him having Lucy, who's the strategy lead, and having Natalie, who's basically the account lead, the three of them, the energy that those three have is fantastic. And I would say, you've got to, that's a really good way of summing it up, Mark, because you've got to take him something he hasn't already got, and he's got to get excited about it. And that's a really tough brief, but he's like a little kid. When you show him something he hasn't seen before, oh my God, we came up with an idea the other day for an amazing brief that I can't talk about, but it was the half an hour before we had to go to the review, and we'd been doing this for 2 weeks and getting absolutely nowhere. And the night before, we called him and we said, look, I feel like we're getting this wrong. Feels like we haven't got the right brief. What do you want? Like, what's in your head? And he went, I don't know. I just, I want to stop everything, and I want everyone to take notice of it, and I want kind of this and this and this, and if you can give me something that can do that. And half an hour before this review, we came up with this idea that was absolutely motherfucking blinding. Like, I'm not gonna lie, it was brilliant. They didn't buy it, but it was just, he saw it, and the minute that we hit the slide and said, this is what we're inspired by, he went, oh my fucking God, that's brilliant. And it's sharing that energy and having that passion, which I think is great. I have this thing next to my desk, which is, I don't know if any of you know Sister Carita. Sister Carita Kent was a nun in California in the 1960s, and she ran an art college called the Immaculate Heart College, and it was all run by nuns. And she is well worth a Google. And when we did Ecover for the first round, I wanted to base all of our work on her. She was a prolific screen printer, an activist. She was all these different things. surprised it's not a biopic, 'cause she's incredible. But this is her rule of work, her rule of her art department rules, and the biggest one on there is the only rule is work. If you work, it will lead to something. It's the people who do all the work all the time who eventually catch on to things. Her list of rules is on the internet. It's brilliant, but yeah, it's that energy. I'm rambling again. Sorry.
Cool. Thank you very much. Cheers.
Sandy, who's next? Because I've got so many, but you don't want to hear my questions. Or do you? I'm going to go to your portfolio in a sec. If you're not going to, anyone to jump in? All right, so I'm going to ask you about your portfolio, because this is really current now, because you know, we were talking this morning about what do we do in a corona world with our portfolio. But portfolio day is going to be online in our studio, online, almost certainly. Like the chances of getting people to come to London in whenever it is we do portfolio day in the next 2, 3, 4 months, slim. So we're going to have an online book. A question this morning is, should we still do a physical book? And I started to talk about your online and your In Atom book at Town Hall this morning, and I kind of stopped. I didn't want to say too much because both were just incredible stories. I don't know if you got any on your laptop or any in your head or any in your loft.
Oh, damn it. I don't think I have them on me.
That's right, let's describe them.
So, as Mark says, I have a bit of a history when it comes to physical books. When we first left SCA, I'll find all these things and I'll email them over to you afterwards. When we first left SCA, Laura and I didn't really have any work together because we'd only worked together for a month. We didn't really have a book. So what we thought we'd do is use our personalities as a sort of battering ram. And we basically did an elevator pitch. So we went to a mate's bar and we hung out in his lift for a while, and every single button in the lift, basically it started out, and it was a YouTube interactive video, and it started out and the lift doors open and it was me and Laura in the lift, and we went, oh my God, it's you, that creative director that we've heard so much about and we would desperately love to work for. Come into the lift, we're going to give you an elevator pitch. And then we cut to the buttons, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And it's like, if you want to hear about our Bex idea, hit 1. If you want to hear about our blah blah idea, all the way down to 6. And then if you want to get out of the lift because you're terrified by us, hit that button. And we basically built every single aspect of that video so that it always looped back round again and it worked. And in the end, once you listen to all the ideas, we'd wave you out of the lift and say goodbye. That was the first bonkers thing we did. Wydens loved that. Didn't go and work for them, but they really liked it. So that shows that worked. And then another thing we made was like a kind of pop-up book. There was a pub, and it was about this big, and all the panels folded out, and all the people were holding all the different bits of the campaign on their phones and things like that. And then when we wanted to leave VCCP, again, like VCCP, God love them, very successful. And actually, I think they've changed from when we were there, but not one of the world's great sexy agencies, put it like that. So actually getting over the inherent snobbiness of people at Droga and people at Wydens when you work at VCCP can be a challenge. So what we did, I wish I had them, I'm sorry I don't. We did pop-up books because I'm quite crafty. And each one of them was tailored to a different person. So the guys who ran Droga at the time had nearly been there for a year. So we did them a first birthday pop-up book with them eating cake on the front, and it opened up and it had all of our work in pop-up form and a little writing along the bottom that kind of explained each idea. For Wyden and Kennedy, we did, for Vicky Maguire at Grey, she was working with Caroline Pay at the time, so they were the first all-female leadership of a creative department. So we did Our Favourite Power Women, an illustrated guide, and it had I think it had Janet Jackson on the cover and Wonder Woman. And you open it, looked like a textbook from the 1970s, and you opened it up, and we'd created the wasteland of masculinity or something like that, with all these women in the middle of it looking really badass and all this like ruins. So we basically conned our way in with these books, which did have our work in, but basically just showed our personality in one kind of like laser guided, super focused execution that talked to that person specifically. We tried to go and see Alex and Adrian at AMV once, and they just done an article in Campaign about how important sleep was. So we did a sleep CD, and we found a man on Fiverr with an amazing American voice that was super deep. And it was basically this hypnotic sleep CD. It was about how you should like go to sleep and then like definitely hire Tom and Christopher. And we bought a little boombox from Argos, and we cut the CD out, and we branded it all. So it looked like Alex and Adrian were in bed together on the front cover, and we sent that into them. So we have a bit of a history of doing shit like that to get people in. I would just say, if you're going to do a digital portfolio day, which I think could definitely work, and actually will probably be easier for a lot of people. Hopefully you'll get even more people coming along. You just have to find a way of breaking the format and ignoring everybody else and making sure people remember you. And portfolio day is normally about people with novelty business cards or giveaway sweets, and that shit never really works on me, because I just end up with a pocket of kind of crap that I don't want. And actually what I want to walk away with are the ideas. So you have to kind of get that balance between coming up with a really clever way of selling yourself, but making sure that the ideas are what people are left with at the end of it. That should just be a kind of a wrapping on the outside. And you are ultimately what people are buying, as Mark always says, people buy people. We definitely do. And the people that we love from SCA, the Lauren and Augustines, the Tom and Ninas, they are people who we have connected with and who have stayed in touch with us and who have input that energy that Mark was talking about earlier and kept that energy up with us, because we love a banter. Lauren and Augustine are some of my favorite people in the whole world, and they are friends now. I think their talent is awesome. But the first time we met them, they sent us a multi-stanza Mayan, like a kind of Mayan poem, rhyming couplets about kind of animal sacrifice and human sacrifice on ziggurats as a thank you card. I don't know if that answers the question.
100% it does. It's that energy and shock. You know, it's the do stuff that make stuff and be you. I love it. Yeah. Who's got a question? Oh my, here we go, Jay.
Oh, yo. How's it going, Tom?
Hello.
Thanks for the talk. Yeah, like I love your stuff, and I love the stuff you did for ITV and Trevor McDonald. That's like one of my favorite pieces of work that's come out in the last 5 years. How much craft and like actual work goes into producing a film like that? You can see it almost in it, but I'd just love to hear what comes in from the planner and what you guys actually put out after that.
Yeah, so that's an interesting one. ITV, like I said earlier, they're terrible at talking about themselves. They're amazing and they have a fantastic story to tell, but they've never really done it. And the brief for that was to talk about the power of television, which is in the era of Netflix and the era of Amazon, is a tough thing to do as ITV, because you've got to really reckon with who you are and acknowledge the fact that you are quite a populist, almost a little bit trashy, dare I say it, brand.
Yeah.
And that's okay. So what we did, in order to make it work, we originally the idea was we were going to take all these different characters, like Helen Mirren in Prime Suspect and Ina Sharples from Coronation Street, and we were going to digitally map their faces and get them to speak the lines to us, the whole script, in a kind of what's that technology called, the face mapping thing, which I can't.
Deep fake.
Yeah, we were going to deep fake the whole thing with bits of ITV from throughout time, which is a really cool idea, but actually in reality, bloody impossible to do in the amount of time we had. We did a bit of it, if you notice, but not very much. We just did Trevor at the beginning and Helen looking at you. But we basically ended up going around and around, and we ended up finding all the causes that really mattered to us. You'll notice that as the gay team, we're often kind of flying the gay agenda and pushing the gay agenda. So there's a lot of homophobia in there and things like that. So we found things that we found really interesting as we researched ITV. I read the history of ITV. It's a very boring book. And we kind of gathered...
Sorry, pause. Can we just acknowledge that for a second?
Yeah.
That he went and he read the fucking biography on his client. And we talk all the time, don't we, about how the answer is in the research. It's going out and really knowing our client inside out. And Tom read the fucking biography on a boring corporate. And sometimes all we do is we go to the homepage of a website. Sorry, Tom.
No, it's fine. It's completely like it was boring as fuck, but it was very useful because I think we understood how ITV was formed. ITV was lots of companies that became one, and they're very interesting as their model. It's not very interesting for now, but they're fascinating. Anyway, so we were able to kind of go back to them and say, actually, this is what makes you amazing, and have the backup of doing the research. What was then very difficult was we engaged a director, a guy at Academy called Billy Boyd Cape, who's very young, very talented.
Yeah, I follow him on Insta, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Christopher and I are always very particular about what we want, which sometimes rubs people up the wrong way, not going to lie. And he knew what he wanted. So he basically shot all the kind of interstitial parts. And for him, that film was very much made of those bits. It was made of recreating people's living rooms and them watching television, which he did beautifully. But for us and for Nils, it was about the footage, and it was about the programs. And obviously ITV also want to show that they do news. They want to show they do documentary. They want to show they do soaps. They want to show they do dramas. And so we had to kind of constantly go back to them and go, well, how about this? How about this? How about this? And there was this juggling act of making sure everyone had their fair share of stuff. But then in the end, what ended up happening, I'm not going to lie, we ended up doing the edit, Christopher and I, with a very talented editor at Assembly Rooms called Ed. And we ended up on YouTube going through hours of footage. We're on Getty, we're going through old ITN stuff, we're going through drama trailers that ITV had put online and forgotten about. We were going for anything. We watched all of Prime Suspect on Netflix, and then we were pulling out Moments of Helen Mirren. And in terms of crafting, I have never crafted anything so much in my entire life as that film. Because all of those bits of footage we had to find, and then we had to go back to ITV and we had to go, we need this in full quality. And then they had to go and find it in their archives, which are not sorted. Right. And then we had to clear it with everybody. And it was just this amazing process. But again, we crafted the living fuck out of it, and we were going until 4 a.m. the day that we had to play it out. We were in now trying to make it look right. So
we should also acknowledge one of the greatest pieces of writing. I think it was Christopher's line towards the end of the film. Do you know the line I'm talking about, Jay?
Yeah. I don't know by heart, but you become what you see, and what you see becomes you. I don't remember it completely, but amazing.
Yeah. Man, how must that have felt when you did you read that line over his shoulder? Did he send it to you? Did he say it out loud?
I think by that point we'd written so many bloody versions of it. Christopher is. I've always been very, very lucky in my career that I started out as a writer, and I do write, but I don't write like Christopher. And the best copywriters I've ever found write nothing like I do, and they take it to another level. And he really is incredibly gifted, incredibly modest, but very, very gifted. And he did an amazing job on that. And Nils loves him for his ability to write as well. I think he's quite a rare talent, really. He's quite old. Christopher is. He went to Cheltenham, I think, to do advertising, and a not very good BA. And he spent his whole time not making any friends and in the library reading all the D&AD annuals. He did it that way. He learned about the history of advertising. He learned about the great ads. And I didn't do any of that because I'm very lazy, and I bounce around looking at different things. So we have a combination of that, which I think makes us quite a good team, really. We come at things very differently. We fight constantly. And it's when we have something good, it's because we don't fight anymore.
Can I ask another question, Tom?
Yeah.
What is that working relationship like, and how are you kind of divvying up the work? And when, for example, Chris is writing, are you writing together? Are you at a piece of paper, or do you go off and come back together? I'm just a little bit interested in that process.
It's constantly changing. We were friends before we were partners. And as we've been together for 5 or 6 years now, and I'm not going to lie, it's like a real relationship. You know, there's ups and massive downs, and recently lots of ups, which has been great. But when we first started working together, Christopher very much wanted to do the writing and go off and do that, and I desperately wanted to be with him all the time because I'm very clingy and needy, and I need somebody else. I need somebody else to bounce off. That's just how my brain works. I need to talk, and he hated that. So we had to adjust to that. And every agency we've been to, we've had to acclimatize and work slightly differently, because they put different demands on you. But actually, we think together. He writes and crafts, but once we need that, without the idea, everything is completely pointless. He is not somebody who will go and write you a spaffy mantra about like, you know what life's like, you know, life's like a floorboard. He doesn't do that because he doesn't believe in it. He can't write it. So we have to get somewhere that he believes in and that we believe in, and then we can go off and craft it. Uncommon is very interesting because Nils comes from a graphic design background, so he's got a lot more input and a lot more interest in work than any boss I've ever worked for, and he will design bits. You know, he ended up doing the final design for the Guardian work himself in Keynote when he was on holiday in Cornwall for a weekend. So he will jump in and he will throw stuff in, and you have to roll with that. And it's kind of wonderful because, again, it's about that energy. And I think Christopher and I have a very, very, very energy-filled relationship. It's not an easy relationship. We are very challenging on each other. We're very hard on each other. And we work very, very hard, and we work a lot. And I think a lot of people find our relationship quite intimidating because it's a bit like, fucking hell. But on a basic level, we love each other very much. And actually, I think from that tension comes our work. And I genuinely look at our work, and there is a fusion there that's happening with something else that I can't do on my own and that he couldn't do on his own. So I think that's what you're looking for. It's very hard to find though, and it took me a good few years to find that. You know, I was 3 years into my career before I found Christopher, but I found him as a friend and knew that there was something there, because we used to sit on Skype and chat to each other and brainstorm when he was at BNB and I was in America. We just riff on stuff he was working on and I was working on. And the funny thing about lockdown is kind of that's where we've ended up again. We've come full circle. And actually the lovely thing about lockdown has been how easy it's been, because we know each other so well. This is almost easier because we can focus more. We haven't got the distractions of the meetings and the producers and the desks and all that shit.
Yeah, because you say just earlier to say you made a couple of 100 films under lockdown for ITV. I mean, it's prolific what you guys are doing as an agency at the moment under lockdown. And I imagine a lot of that muscle memory must be helping you.
Yeah, Uncommon is a machine, and it's lovely because you're making so much that you get less precious about what you're making. And it's quite an incredible place to work, and I'm very proud of it because actually this whole situation, coronavirus, has been very hard. I read your article, Mark, about agencies maybe getting rid of placement teams and not looking after them properly, and Uncommon has we've furloughed a lot of our more junior members of staff, but we haven't got rid of any placements, and we haven't, our placement team are furloughed, which is great.
That's why I wrote that article and called it Creative Leadership, because some have behaved really well. Most, obviously, because this industry likes to talk a good talk, but doesn't always behave in the right way. Sadly, the very first thing they did was dump their placement teams without going into accounts or asking their accountant for some advice on whether they were protected.
I mean, we are just starting to get to it's annoying because we're just starting to get to the level now. We won Dreams and we won B&Q, which are big beasts accounts. We were starting to get to the level where the agency was growing and we were able to bring more younger talent in, which is so exciting because that's the kind of point you want to get to. And now this has sort of paused everything a little bit, but Uncommon we love that kind of energy. We love having new people in. We thrive off it. So I look forward to when we can bring more people in, figuring out new ways of doing it.
I genuinely believe that the good times will come back faster than normal recessions. It won't be immediate, but it will come back, and that this intake are going to have an advantage over all of their competitors because they haven't stopped learning and working. So when Nils is ready to find a placement team, if they work their nuts off and also do some of the things that you were talking about earlier, they stand a better chance than the other schools because they're continuing to work towards their goals.
I think it's going to sound really harsh me saying this, but I feel like a lot of agencies that I know about have actually taken this opportunity to go, that person who's been here for 10 years but doesn't really do anything, but we pay an absolute fortune, do we really still kind of need them around? Maybe we don't, and they've got rid of them or they furloughed them. And I think that gives you guys an amazing opportunity to come in with energy and enthusiasm and value for money and go, actually we're fucking awesome and those guys are kind of losers. And I think it should I hope it shakes everything up a bit because it can get stupid.
DJ.
Hey, I was wondering, you touched on it a little bit just now, and I wanted to ask before about partnerships and how you found like trying different people. In particular, I'm wondering about like SCA's, it's a very enclosed system, and you seem to have, as well as SCA being its own enclosed system, you seem to have a very particular way of working, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
I kind of feel similar in terms of like I'm quite specific in what I want to do and how I want to do it,
Yeah.
and it can lead to friction sometimes.
Yeah.
So I'm worried that like once I leave SCA, I'll just look like a madman to people. You know, I'll be like, you got to scan, and then you got to do this. So what are you on, mate? So how did you find that, and how did you find that meeting your current partner and him having a similar energy level but a different way of working, perhaps? How did you, the trials and failures and successes of partnerships? I was just wondering about that.
I think him and I both, before we met each other, had partners who potentially were very talented but were not as aggressive as we are in a nice way. You know, like we're very like, I'm a perfectionist. Christopher's another level. Like he makes me look like an absolute sloth. But in finding him, I found a similar level of energy that I think was really powerful. It's very difficult to deal with sometimes because he makes me feel like I don't know what I'm doing still. But at the same time, he pushes me. I think I wouldn't worry. I mean, all I would say is it's very easy to not be open. You've got to open your creative process up to other people's way of doing things. You've got to remain absorbent. You've got to remain open to other people and give them a chance. And actually, what I got out of SCA was I'd already been somebody who considered myself a creative person for a very long time before I came to SCA. But SCA was a bit of a reset. It was a chance for me to have some massive fights with people and to meet some people that I'm still friends with right now, and to try working with different people, even though sometimes it made me really uncomfortable, because if you do that enough, you start to learn things about yourself. And I think it's very, very important to do that. It's very easy not to see the benefit of SCA when you're in it because it's so intense, but having the opportunity to work with all these different people and to try is something you're only going to get once, and it's never too late to try working with somebody at SCA is what I would say. It wasn't until the last month that I worked with Laura again and we kind of made it happen. If you've got the energy and you've got the intention, then it will work for you, but just don't be afraid if it doesn't work straight away, and don't be afraid if it makes you feel really uncomfortable. Or sometimes working with Christopher gives me a feeling in the pit of my stomach that I don't get with anybody else on earth. And I'm sure he feels the same way. When I'm good and when I'm creative, it's because I really feel something. And sometimes that feeling isn't very nice. But I wouldn't worry about people thinking you're weird, because actually...
No, it's great, Todd, because again, you went and partnered with Victoria from the first intake, from the Busk intake. We can talk about how important she is in your life and you and hers separately. But the fact is that you did a D&AD together from memory, or no, so you worked with different intakes. Now, currently, we have furloughed students in the virtual studio. So I've got my current students, but we've got people from several intakes here.
Yeah.
So again, you've got some wisdom that you can share about not being precious about your intake, but sleeping in other intakes.
Yeah, however it works. I mean, if you find that person, you'll know that you found them. It's like when you meet somebody you know is going to be your mate. If you can find that little hint of something, then just go after it. And the great thing about studying at SCA and about Mr. Lewis is that he's a fairly adaptable man. If you take him a good proposition, make him a good deal, then he'll consider it. And I would say that goes with creative departments. You look at me and Christopher getting hired at VCCP, we never bloody worked together. That looked like a stupid idea. Like, who would hire two junior creatives that have never worked together? But we packaged it and we did it, and we were open about what we wanted to do, and then we wanted to be a bit different, and then we made it work in our favour.
Brilliant.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you, DJ. Thanks, Tom. Anybody else?
I just asked Tom about Neil's killing your work and your work getting killed in general, and you're picking yourself up again, and clients making the work shit. And talk about that process, please.
Of course, I could talk about it for days. Nils is ultimately my boss, and because Uncommon is very small, we don't have layers and layers and layers and layers of creative directors. So we will walk into a room and we will go, Nils, what do you think of this? There isn't anybody else you can appeal to. If he doesn't like it, if he's not feeling it, he'll start fidgeting, he'll read his phone, he'll do something else. He'll come up with a better idea himself because he's very good at that. In terms of picking yourself up and people killing ideas, like I said, when we were at Grey, I feel like I learned so much about that. We did the M&S Christmas campaign, and God love them, M&S are nice people, but they have no bloody clue what they're doing. And that's not the fault of the agency, that's the fault of the business, because it's a huge, giant, dysfunctional blob, and they didn't know what they're doing, and their business is tanking and they're panicking, and they have all these different concerns about whether they've ordered enough socks and all that stuff. And that is having an impact on your creative work. We must have written 60 Christmas adverts for M&S, and some of them were genuinely brilliant. And I don't want to toot my own horn, but they were fucking great, and they were all kinds of genres. They were just. It was almost like doing John Lewis for a whole year. It was awful, but every single time that we ended up taking something in and it would get killed, we would pick ourselves up again and make it work. And in the end, actually, what happened is they bought an idea from somebody else, and we offered to look after it because the team that were on it were quite junior, and we thought it was the right thing to do. And it was an absolute car crash. We made the most of it, and we picked ourselves up and we moved on, because I think the most important thing, like that thing I showed earlier, the Sister Carita thing, is the only rule is work. Like, you've got to keep working. You're only as good as the last thing you did. And if the last thing you did is not very good, better do something else good quickly. I think it's very easy to become emotionally attached to your ideas. And I think it's very easy to become emotionally attached to your book, to your website, to your partner. And you lose that subjectivity. You are, as a person who works in advertising, an outsider. And you should always remain that. You should be able to step back from what you've done and look at it and go, you know what, this is shit. I'm going to start again. Or have somebody else come in and go, this is shit. And then be able to just step back and go, actually, I can see why you would think this is shit. As long as you're working for somebody you trust and working with somebody you trust, that is a bit easier. And that's what you've got to look for in your job and in your mentors and in your partners, as somebody who you can believe, and you can take the word of, and you can swallow your own pride and be like, actually, yeah, okay, I need to stop. And I do it still now. I pursue whimsy, and I come up with ideas that I think are great, and Christopher will just go, no. And it still breaks my heart, but we're very tough with each other, and you pick yourself up and you carry on, because that's what being great at advertising is about picking yourself up and moving. And creativity is speed and absorbing and being passionate and energetic and just putting it back out there in the world. Because if you can do that, then you can wow a client. And if you can wow a client, you can sell anything. And I think that's what Uncommon has taught me, and what Nils Leonard has taught me, who's a deeply charismatic man. He doesn't look backwards, he only looks forward, and he keeps moving all the time. It's really important.
Great answer, thank you.
Great answer. Thanks for the question, Pete. Charles, I saw you. You're there.
Yep. Hi, Tom.
Hi.
So I think it's pretty fair to say that sort of everyone wants to make standout, memorable, different work. But not everyone can work for someone like Nils. Can we hope to be able to, if we don't get to work at somewhere like Uncommon, to be able to push this work out ourselves? Or is it very much down to who we pick as our leader and choose to follow at the agencies we go to?
I think you've got to be realistic about where you are and what you're doing. I was listening to Desert Island Discs yesterday, and quilting, as you do. And I listened to Ruth Jones, who wrote Gavin and Stacey's Desert Island Discs. And at the end of that, they played a bit of James Corden's Desert Island Discs. And I don't really like James Corden very much, but he said something quite interesting. He was in the History Boys as a musical, touring around the world, massively successful, Alan Bennett play. He was in there with people like Russell Tovey, who were going to become massive. And he basically said, it got to the point where I was in the History Boys, where backstage every night, the other guys would come in and they'd have scripts under their arm, they'd have film scripts, and they'd have offers, and they'd have TV shows, and they'd have all this stuff. And he said something like, along the lines of, he's not one of the pretty ones. Like, James Corden ain't no looker. He's never going to be a romantic lead. And he basically said there came a point where he realized that if he was going to make it, he had to make it himself. And he had to not try and compete with those people. He had to follow his own bliss. And that's when he ended up coming up with Gavin and Stacey. And he realized he had to write it, he had to do it, he had to do something a bit unusual. I've always gone and worked for people I really like, and I've always just gone on my gut. So Jason, I went to Chicago to work for, was a bit of a shit. Very cool, but a shit. But he had this amazing magnetic energy. He could command a room. He could just shout people down. He knew exactly what he wanted. Vicky Maguire at Grey, really, really strong, fantastic, old school, very talented writer, hilarious storyteller. So every single boss that I've ever worked for, they may not have been perfect, but they've always had something that I think, God, I wish I could steal that from them. And you always absorb something. And as long as you're not, I know a lot of creatives who've come out of SEA and they're like, I only want to go to Droga. I only want to work for, now it's Nils Leonard, for instance. I only want to go to Wieden & Kennedy. And they sabotage themselves because they don't get anywhere. Because if they don't get there immediately, they give up. And that's very natural, but it's not going to get you anywhere, because ultimately this is a fantastic way of being creative and earning money. And as long as you're doing that with somebody, even if it's just your partner that you like, we've ended up in situations where the only person I really have who I really love and respect in my job is Christopher. And luckily we're a little unit against the world and we can make that work. And, you know, when we were at Grey and we were really cruising around doing nothing for large portions of the year, we started to learn how to write television scripts. We started to do courses online together. We started to so I would say, like, you may not be at the dream agency, you may not be working for the dream person, but you can always be pushing it in different ways and do it for yourself. Like, you know, follow your bliss. It really is. If you can find a job and they pay you, and maybe it's not ideal, or maybe it's kind of cushy, use that time that they're giving you and that money they're giving you to invest in yourself and do something else. Follow the next. I've never had a defined career path I want to get to, because I've always just had a nice time doing what I'm doing. And does that answer the question?
Yeah, no, that's really helpful.
Thank you, DJ.
Do you find that do you find it important to look at the leader or leaders of an agency more important than the work that they produce, or both in equal measure?
I think both. I think there are some people who are better leaders than they are creatives. And then there are some people who are a combination of the two. And I think you can learn something from both. I think also you have to look at the people around you, because quite often if you're in a really big agency, you don't have contact with the leadership really. You want to try and wow them, and you want to be their best friend, and you want to get in their pocket, and you want to be front of mind, but they're not always available. So it's the people around you, it's the creative directors and the other creatives that you need to kind of draw on and learn from. Because I think Nils is an interesting one, because he's a very good creative, and I didn't think he would be. I thought he'd just be a kind of Flash Harry, but he's a really good creative. He's got really good ideas, but he's also a very inspirational man. You know, he's much more charismatic than I will ever be. He's just a charming little fucker, and he's melded those two things together, and he gets a lot of stick for it, because I think people think that he's not the real deal. He's not old school advertising, but he's brilliant, and he deserves the plaudits that he has, because he works very hard for where he's got.
Yeah, I meant it at the beginning. I really see Uncommon as now Saatchi. I mean, it's so exciting seeing what they're doing. Yeah, you know, it's just interested to see what happens if and when one of the big opcos comes along and throws some money around. But who knows? Who knows? I
don't know. I think the founders had a very difficult time extricating themselves from WPP when they.
Yeah, that was famous.
That was very, very gnarly, and I think they've genuinely set out to do something different, which I think shows in the work, because it's not like an opportunity to. Those three are very viable, and I think they could make an agency that would sell for a lot of money. But I think they genuinely want to build something big and something good and something different. It's a very genuinely exciting place to work, and
100%.
I get a lot of pleasure out of it, and I like the people there a lot, which is a new thing for me. You know.
That's great to hear. There's a time I think Charles Saatchi was going to buy a bank at one stage. Do you ever read about that story where he was back in the day? And it's definitely the sort of thing you can imagine Nils doing. You know,
he want to start his own bank. You know, he's interesting because he's he wants to make brands. He wants to build his own. He tells a story a lot about being on stage, getting a Grand Prix for Volvo Life Paint, like it or loathe it. He won a lot for it, and he stood up there and thought apparently that he'd spent 2 years trying to sell this idea in, and he kind of just was a bit like, why am I not just doing this for myself? I could have done it in 3 months. Why am I bothering to do it for Volvo? And that's kind of informed his whole view about Uncommon. It's why not do it yourself? Why wait around for a big brand to throw you a couple of 100,000 to make something when you could find that yourself and build it yourself, which is a very kind of SCA sort of approach to stuff, which I like.
Cool, thank you. Chloe.
Hey, thank you for your talk, first of all. I was wondering if there was any piece of advice that you've ever had that stuck with you or made something click in your approach to advertising. Or maybe a book that you've read or something.
Oh, so many books. I don't really read books about advertising because I find them a bit boring. I've got Hegarty on advertising bouncing around somewhere. I think, I'm going to sound like a suck up. I think Mark's thing about people by people is true. It's the truest thing that I've ever been told about advertising, because ultimately it goes so much further than just people by people and will give you a job. When you meet somebody from advertising, you need to form a connection with them. They're looking to form a connection with you. We love to bring in teams who we get something out of and there's a spark. But it goes beyond that, because when you're in an advertising agency, everyone in that agency needs to buy into what you're doing. You're the person with the bonkers idea. You need to have the account team need to buy into you. The strategy team need to buy into you. The PR team need to buy into you. You need to kind of make an effort and work all of those different things too. But then beyond that, when you reach a certain level, you're suddenly sat in front of a client, and you're sat in front of junior clients and medium level clients. And then suddenly I remember we had Dreams. We wanted them as a client, and I ended up sat opposite the CEO of Dreams, and he'd gone, Tom, tell me, how are you going to redesign my stores so they're better? And I just kind of thought, I'm not fucking qualified for this. I have no fucking idea. I come up with some bonkers stuff. But I looked him in the eye and I gave him my ideas, which were a bit weird. And to his credit, he went, I really like these. That's very nice. It was lovely to meet you. And you think, you've got to be somebody who demonstrates that passion all the time, because he's, again, buying into me and I'm buying into him because I quite liked him. And it's so people-based, this industry. It's so not about, it is about the work. The work is the output, but the work is just a demonstration of the chemistry between different people. And that's what kind of makes it wonderful. And when you've been doing it for a little while, I'm now getting to the point where I can pull favors from sound companies and from finishing companies and editors, and they're fantastic people and they're friends, and it's kind of magic. And that's when it's really got fun in the last couple of years, as I've been able to kind of be my own person and pull out the people I love to work with and get them back in for a different job. And that's the best piece of advice, people by people. You've got to, whenever we finish a job, we send out a thank you note to everybody. We try and thank the editor, and we start with the sound guy. And it's very old fashioned, and it's what my dad does. That's where I get it from. But people fucking love a card with thank you written on it, because people don't do it. You've got to invest that time and be a person and just be yourself. People like it.
Cool, thank you.
Thank you. You're answering that, Pete. Are you still on the call, Pete?
I am, yes.
You'll get this, I'm sure, because you've worked with the man and he's been into school. I hope that Tom takes this the right way. Well, you just answered that, Tom, in a couple of other ways before. I was so hearing Mark Denton talking. Could Tom be? I don't know. Are you going to start your own agency one day? Are you going to do a Denton? Are there any other questions? What do you think, Pete? Is there a bit of Denton in Tom? Not every night, obviously.
No, Tom's, Denton's Denton. Okay, the haircuts and the tashes might be similar and the passion,
right?
but they're different.
Yeah, of course.
They are who they are. Great talk, though, Tom. Thanks very much.
Are there any more questions from anybody? Tom, an absolute treat. You've got no idea. I've got 8 spreadsheets I've got to turn to in a minute for a finance session. And there's nothing more boring in the world, honestly, than what I've got coming up. The last couple of hours have been an absolute joy. You make me so proud. I love watching your work. I love it how you formed relationships with every single intake at SCA. Christ, you even helped one of them get married. And here you are, and long may it continue. Tom, thank you so much. Stay safe. and hope to see you very soon. Buy a drink very soon.
Yes,
Take care.
definitely. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.